So, Diablo Immortal entered its public beta on PC on Thursday, and I spent the last 2 days running it through its paces. And it's important to note that they've made it fairly clear with the policies that the PC client is what's in beta, not the game itself. So some judgments can be made as to what to expect from the title and its monetization. For this video, I will look at the money aspect of Immortal, but before we do that, I want to just look at it as a game first, for better or worse. In terms of story, it takes place between Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, and bases its core story, at least at this point, around Skarn's attempts to resurrect his master, Diablo. You mostly pursue the story by revisiting iconic areas from the two games it's squashed between, though some of the landmarks are oriented quite a bit differently from what you remember, though a lot of familiar faces nonetheless, like Kasia, Flavi, the Summoner, and the Countess, all make appearances within the first few hours of gameplay. Overall, I would say the story is more giving fans of the series something to latch onto rather than developing something of significant depth or intrigue. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I just wish there was more meat on this entry's bones to give me some real motivation to push into beyond simply the gameplay and loot grind that is very obviously focused on. I sadly found myself mindlessly skipping the story at times since it was a lot of fluff information with name drops and only a bit of real world building itself. So since the gameplay is the core part of it rather than the story, we need to look at that. Generally speaking, it plays like Diablo 3 but simpler and in more bite-sized chunks, and it does like drowning you in sparkles on the ground, even so far that it can't seem to really decide whether it wants quest or bounty completion to bury you in a loot pinata or hand a small reward to you. Generally speaking though, if you beat something up, you can expect to have to click all around to pick up items as part of the reward process, that is, if you have not turned on auto pickup, which thankfully is a thing. Whereas if you're just doing the walk and talk quest that you have you bouncing around town, you'll usually just get a pop-up and gain the item. Though speaking of beating things up, by beating certain enemies you trigger a cash shop announcement. I got my first one after only playing for about 30 minutes. It basically offers you to buy a bundle based on the enemy you beat as a one-time purchase, which judging by other aspects of the game is one time per account, not one time per character, so keep that in mind. So chances are your first character will grow exponentially faster than any of your subsequent characters if you do spend money on it, but this is also true whether you're free to play or pay to play because there are rewards that are just one time only as well for free to play players. That said, I doubt any character will progress through the story very slowly since being a mobile game, dungeons are short, but I found it slightly odd that bounties actually seem to take longer than the full-blown dungeons seem to, which may just be a balancing thing or a design thing. As far as the repetitive content, such as rifts and challenge dungeons, those seem to fall somewhere in between the two in terms of length, at least for me, though maybe the Necromancer is easy mode or something, at least he feels like he's able to cheese quite a bit of the hurdles that you come across compared to non-minion characters. This speed is further punctuated by mechanical unlocks as well, as it felt about every half hour or so, almost on the dot, I unlocked yet another mechanic. Early on being stuff like unlocking the inventory or skill slots, and later on unlocking stuff like clans, warbands, bounties, etc. Some with obvious monetization, others without. And I wager if I play this for several more hours, the pace of these unlocks would easily continue, and continue to include more methods of monetization as well, though we'll get to that in a bit. This is because there's still one thing I want to talk about in the non-money aspects of the game, and that would be the interface and controls. There's no options menu until you get into the game, at least when I played it, so make sure your headphones are turned down, and even whenever you get into the game, don't expect to use a controller yet, because it was god-awful on all 4 controllers I tried, with plenty of input lag on normal controls, and even worse input lag whenever I was using the on-screen cursor, just to point wherever I wanted to, just for menu navigation. It just randomly wouldn't register that I was even moving the joystick. And I tested it with 4 controllers, as I said, an Xbox controller, a Logitech F310, an 8-bit DOE SN30 Pro Plus, which is a mouthful, and I even tried it with a Hori fight pad because I had it on the desk. None of them felt good, so it was keyboard and mouse or bust. So I would say even though my expectations were low since it is a mobile to PC port, this is one aspect where even bottom of the barrel wasn't low enough. Even with keyboard and mouse though, the boxes for interacting with enemies and objects are all weird as hell, so you'd sometimes have really small boxes, really big boxes, and it interfered with each other, but it was a lot more tolerable than controller at least. Now, stepping into the quagmire that is monetization, individual thresholds here will vary greatly. Some people are fine with being whales, while others want to spend absolutely nothing but time, and the game does cater to both, at least to an extent. Though there are some key aspects to bring up in monetization, starting with one we mentioned earlier, the themed one-time purchase pop-ups. These are probably the least egregious since they're for the most part just a bundle of premium currency, items, and a mix of normal and premium items for rift creation and modification. And they're relatively cheap investments should you want to just throw a little money at the game. And since they're cash value purchases, you don't end up with a situation where you need to buy $5 of currency to get a $1 item, though the premium currency they give you is about the same as what you would get from buying premium currency by itself. The next cash shop item worth noting is the Battle Pass system, which there's sort of two of, with the titular Battle Pass having two tiers, a $5 tier that gives you access to all the ranked up boosts, which includes items and such as you progress for the month, and there's the Empowered Battle Pass that gives you free ranks as well as additional cosmetics right out of the gate that costs $15 a month. The other Battle Pass-like purchase is called the Boon of Plenty, which gives you extra daily bonuses and additional awards. The closest thing I can equate it to would be MechWarrior Online's Premium Time, since you can purchase spans of time with it to maintain the reward, but you need to play to receive them. This Boon of Plenty costs $10 a month, so if you want maximum benefits, you will be spending $25 a month on the game to unlock all of these, just for the monthly bonuses. And some of the bonuses do provide in-game benefits, such as access to better rifts, easier, and a good bit of utility. In addition to those, you can also buy premium currency to exchange for other objects. Those are called Eternal Orbs. You can buy 60 for $1 or 7,200 for $100. These in turn are exchanged for both another semi-premium currency called Platinum that is used to exchange for objects in the player-driven market. So yes, you can real money in the market, but you can't real money out of the market, so no cashing out, just cashing in. And you can also exchange these orbs for cosmetics, materials to enhance your characters, and top-tier rift modifiers, which are your main tool for getting legendary gems for your endgame builds, other than crafting them. You can get about 45 of the crests for rifts for $100, which sounds like a lot, but rifts can take up to 3 crests per run, so do expect to be dumping some serious cash if you want to farm your own late-game items. That is, if you don't plan on using the platinum farming method of selling items to pay-to-play individuals to build up the platinum to get the items you want for the end game. Simply put, it is free to play, and you can be competitive in free to play if you're able to invest enough time to counterbalance the money investment of others. But frankly, it feels like they intentionally made the currency layers all over the place, since even in this video I have not covered all the currencies, such as hilts, crafting materials, etc., or the layer after layer of interwoven tasks such as bestiaries, stat milestones, map exploration, quest completion, and repetition, etc. There is a whole list of them to keep you at the well I'm close to X treadmill that is the Skinner box we know and love. Overall, there is a passable game at its core, and the dungeons are actually short enough to not feel nearly as grindy as some other post-game activities you can find in other action RPGs, and it will keep you microdosed with that dopamine if you let it. I just find it to be a little bit off-putting with how many layers there are of buy now, one time only, pay monthly to get these rewards, and here's a dozen different currencies you'll be exchanging as you play. I just can't justify getting too deep into it because it feels like the gaming equivalent of spending an afternoon listening to a snake oil salesman in exchange for an average game of chess.